David Davis.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Can I say firstly to the Honourable Lady for Rotherham, who's just spoken, I don't agree with every detail of what she says, but we very much share our aims, and I have to say she has exactly the right surname for what she's doing, standing up for children. And at risk of giving the whip on the bench a seizure, I'm going to start by congratulating the government for what it's done so far, and for the Minister, both in terms of delaying this, because I will come to a second into the question of timing, but also in terms of what they've done to modify their stance so far. In timing terms, as my honourable friend's not here now, said, this is about 5 bills in one. I mean, it really should have had massively more time. You know, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a very old man looking back in time, there was a time when this would have had 5 days of report. And that, if we were going to do such a big bill like this, that is what should have happened. Secondly, I'm going to say, and the honourable members opposite won't agree with me on this, I'm going to say that I'm grateful this decided to remove the legal but harmful clause. And I say this directly to the Honourable Lady for Pontypridd. They're all testing my memory today. The simple fact is, again, we don't differ on aim. After all, look at my new clause 16, which is designed specifically to protect children. It's the method of doing it. The truth of the matter is, in my view, there was once upon a time a habit or tradition that this chamber would consider a Companies Act every year, Companies Bill every year, because things were changing over time. We ought to have a digital bill every year specifically to address not legal but harmful, but is it harmful enough to be made illegal, which it obviously is in the case of self-harm. So we have similar aims, but it's a difference of perspective on how we attack it. And I look at it from a perspective of somebody who has seen many, many, many pieces of legislation go wrong in this House. The best of intentions going very badly in the wrong direction. But I say to the Minister, and he knows that he's a favourite of mine, that I say from his previous job, enough hooting down here, he did a fantastic job in his previous job. I say to him that I think this bill is a huge improvement, but he's got a lot more to do, as they're recognising, in terms of the return to committee. Now, there will be an area where I disagree with many of my honourable and right honourable friends here, and that's on the question of encryption. Now, by allowing Ofcom to issue notices directing companies to use accredited technology, I put that in quotes, accredited technology, they might just as well have said magic, because we don't know what they mean by it. Accredited technology, clause 104, will actually create a pressure to undermine the end-to-end encryption that is crucial, not a desirable end, crucial to the operation of our communication. The clause sounds innocuous and legalistic, especially given the notices will be issued in order to remove terrorist or child sexual exploitation content we all agree has no place online.
Will
indeed.
Would my right honourable friend agree, though, that rather than it being magic, if you can demystify the process and say there's an existing technology that is available, which has been proven to work, that the company can't just ignore that, they have to explain why they're not using that or something better?
Yes, I'll come back to that in some detail, but I'll say to them, look, I don't know, first time I ever used encryption, it was one-time pads and sent by Morse, so it's quite a long time ago. But the last time is much more recent, and the issue here is that what it puts pressure on them to do is what you might term real-term decryption. And the only way of dealing with that is either have it unencrypted, say on the server, or to have it weakly encrypted, or to create a backdoor. We're not talking here about metadata, which I'll come back to in a second. I'm talking about content. Yeah? And in that context, if you need to make it rapidly accessible, then that's bound to lead you to a weakening. And we can have, we all, perhaps this is a debate almost for a specialist forum, but I think very much that this is very dangerous for a whole series of areas. I mean, remember, what do we need encryption for? We need encryption for banking, we need it for legal and privileged conversations. Our conversations with our constituents over detailed matters, family matters. I could go on and on and on about the areas where encryption matters. I give way.
I thank Brent for giving way. And he will also be aware that this will actually encompass every single telephone conversation when it switches to IP, and that becomes data as well.
That's correct. And the companies cannot easily focus this on malicious content alone. And this is the problem. With everything we do in dealing with enforcing the law, we have to balance the extent to which we make the job of the law enforcement agency possible, ideally easy, against the rights that we take away from innocent citizens. That's the key balance. You know, many bad things happen in households. We don't require people to live in houses with glass walls, and so that's the intrinsic problem we have. Now, that can't sit comfortably. That imposition on privacy can't sit comfortably with anybody who takes privacy rights seriously. And I just say as an aside to the House, the last thing we need, given that we want something to happen quickly, or at least effectively soon, the last thing we need is to find ourselves in, let's say, either a Supreme Court or European Court case on privacy imposition. And I don't think it's necessary, frankly. So that's where I think the argument stands. And by the way, if we end up in a case like that, what it will be about, it won't be about paedophiles or criminals or whatever. It'll be about the weakening of the encryption, let's say, of an investigative journalist or whistleblower's data. That's where it will come back to haunt us, and we have to put that test on it. That's really my sort of main opening gambit there. So the other thing I'll say, and I'm conscious that everybody's spoken quite long, so I'm trying to make this short. The other thing I'll say is we do have weapons. We have weapons in particular in terms of metadata. If I remember correctly, I think Facebook takes down about 300,000 or so sites for paedophile content alone, you know, and millions for other reasons. And so the use of metadata is very important. I mean, Europol, when it did a survey, what it was useful in terms of the data arising from the internet, from social media and the like, put content number 7, you know, after all sorts of other data that came before. So I won't labour the point. I just worry about this. I think we need to get this right. I think the approach we've taken so far is more of a blunderbuss approach than a rifle shot, and we need to correct it. And that's what my 2 amendments are about. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is New Clause 16. Now, a number of people have spoken or mentioned it in favourable terms. What this will do is make it an offence to encourage or assist another person to self-harm, including suicide. And I know that the government has difficulties with other legislation interacting with this, the suicide legislation and so on, to get it right. But what I'm saying is, here, take this amendment, and I will put it to a vote today. Take this amendment, and if it's not quite perfect, then amend it again in the Lords. I'm happy with that, but I want to be sure that this goes into this legislation. Why? Because, again, it comes back to the philosophical distinction between legal but harmful, which put that decision first in the hands of a minister, then in the hands of an entirely whip-chosen SI committee, in my view, neither a trustworthy vehicle for the protection of free speech, and takes it from there and puts it in this chamber and that chamber. Our control, in as much as we control the internet, should be controlled by primary legislation with the maximum scrutiny, the maximum exposure, the maximum democratic content. And if we do it that way, then nobody can argue with us. We will be world leaders, because we're pretty much the only people who can do that. And frankly, as I say, we should come back to this time and time again, because this won't be the last shot at this. People have talked about the grey area. How do you assess a grey area? Do I trust Whitehall to do it? No, I don't. Good minister though we have, you know, he won't always be there. You know, there'll be another minister. You know, we may have the British equivalent of Trump one day. Who knows? You know, we don't want to leave it in that context. We want this House. One second. This House to control it. This House and the public scrutiny that this chamber gets to be in control of it. I give way to my honourable friend. Right on.
Many, many years ago in the 1970s, I was much involved in the Protection of Children Bill, which was one of the first steps to condemn and to make illegal the manner in which children were made, had available to them explicit imagery, and also their involvement in the making of such films. Then there was the Broadcasting Acts and the Video Bill Acts, and I was very much involved at that time, indeed, in saying that we ought to prohibit it in videos, etc. I got an enormous amount of flack for that. Now we've moved right the way forward, and it's tremendous to see not only the government but also the opposition cooperating together on this theme. Could I say, however, I very much sympathise with what he's just said, and I'm very inclined to support his amendment for that reason, but also the member for Barking, because I was deeply impressed by the way in which she presented the argument about the personal liability of directors, because you can't distinguish between a company and the people who run it. And I'm very interested to hear what the government has to say in reply to that.
Well, I very much agree with my honourable friend. He and I have been allies in the past and sometimes opponents, but very often he's been far ahead of other people. I'm afraid I don't remember the 1970. Did I say 1770? the 1970. That was before even my time, but I do remember the 1990 intervention he made, and I do remember the fuss it caused. So I think from that point of view, I absolutely agree with him. So on this matter, what I put in front of the House is a clearly worded clause. I hope they'll give it proper consideration. I think it's very important that we put something on the face of the bill, even if the government quite properly comes back and amends it later. Now, may I raise one last point, Madam Deputy Speaker, before I sit down, which has sort of come up as we've talked through these issues, and the question of individual responsibility. And one or two ladies on that side of the House, honourable ladies on that side of the House, have cited basically algorithmic outcomes. And I worry, and as I said to the right honourable lady for Barking, that I worried about how we place the responsibility, what it would do with the courts, how it would lead them to behave, and so on. And this is something we will debate out in the next few days and when it's come back again, I think. But there's one other issue which nothing in this bill covers, and I'm not entirely sure why. But much of this behaviour pattern is algorithmic. Yeah. And it's algorithmic with an explicit design. A number of people have said this is designed as clickbait. This is designed to bring back... Now, I think we may get to a point, particularly if we come back to this year after year after year, of saying there are going to be rules about your algorithms. So you have to write it into the algorithm. You have to write into the algorithm. You will not use... certain sorts of content, whether it's pornographic content or whatever, as clickbait. And I think we need to think about that in a very sophisticated and subtle way. And I'm looking at the ex-chairman of the Select Committee at one point on this, because I think that this, if we are going to be the innovators, and we are the digital world innovators, we're going to be innovators, we have to get this right. Yeah?
My honourable friend is right to raise what's a really important point, but the big area here is not just clickbait, it's AI-generated recommendation tools like a newsfeed on Facebook or Next Up on YouTube. In terms of mitigating the illegal content on the platforms, that includes not actively recommending it through those two. It's not just content moderation removal, it's not promoting.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. I use clickbait as shorthand, but the simple truth is the AI-generated is also a misnomer. Because these are not normally AIs, they are normally algorithms written specifically to recommend, to maximise returns, to maximise revenue. We're not surprised at that. Why should we be? These are commercial companies. That's what they're going to do. And every single commercial company in the world operates with a regulatory framework that prevents them making profits out of antisocial behaviour. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Just on the AI point, the advances we've seen over the weekend is quite remarkable. I've just asked OpenAI.com to write a speech in favour of the online safety bill, and to be honest, it's not bad. And so this goes to show that the risks to people it's not just going to be algorithms. People are going to be increasingly scammed by AI, and we need a bill that can adapt with the times as we move forward.
Yeah, perhaps we should run my speech against the... I'm teasing. I'm coming to the end of my comments, Madam Deputy Speaker. The simple truth is that these mechanisms, call them what you like, are controllable. if we put our mind to it. It requires subtlety, it requires testing the thing out in practice, it requires enormous expert input, but we can get this right.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.